Thank you for your patience. Welcome to Rakuten Technology Conference. Now, we are going to start the next session with Satoshi Nakajima. The session is Let's Invent Future. Please welcome Mr. Satoshi Nakajima.
Hello. Thank you. So is it true that I'm going to do all in English, even though a lot of Japanese speakers here? Okay. So today's title is about the future, innovations. And when Rakuten asked me to speak at this event, there are a lot of possibilities I could talk. I can talk about my ideas about futures or my past or some messages, but I decided to send a single message, right? Even though this is a 45-minute session, it's so hard to remember what I talked. So I'm going to send just one message for everybody to bring it back. Of course, I'm going to mention it later, but don't pay too much attention to the detail. I just want to give sort of the mindset we need to have an engineer to push the human forward. So a little bit about my introduction of myself. It's a bit like advertisement at the beginning of the YouTube video. But unfortunately, there's no skip this ad button here. So I'm going to talk by myself a little bit. So I was in Microsoft from 86 to 2000. 3 years in Japan and 10 years in US, the Seattle, actually the Redmond, Washington. And I was the software architect of Windows 95, 98, and also Internet Explorer 3.0 and 4.0. And while I was working on it, I was in charge of the architecture of the integration of Internet Explorer to Windows. As many of you guys know, that caused some problem with the government. And as a result, the Microsoft ended up paying like $1 billion fine. And everybody said, that's my fault. But at the same time, the stock price went up quite a bit. I think the market cap easily doubled. So we gained more than $100 billion. So it's not that result. Okay. And then at the same time, I'm a founder of UI Evolution. I founded the UI Evolution in 2000, back in Seattle, Washington. I still live in Seattle. I come in to Japan 3-4 times a year these days. But the UI Evolution was founded in US and raised about $11 million from venture capitalists and sold the company to Square Enix for $56 million in 2004. So that was a good return to investors as well as all the founding members, including myself. And I worked for Square Enix for about 3 years after the acquisition. There was a little bit of a lockup period as well, but also I wanted to do something for Square Enix. But unfortunately, that acquisition was a mistake. It was a bit obvious at the beginning, but it's hard to say no if somebody wants to buy the company. So all the investors managed to convince me that this is the right acquisition, so being acquired, but that was a wrong marriage. And they decided to shut down the company in 2004. So we said, if you want to shut down the company, then we want to buy out. So we did the management buyout back in 2007. And it became an independent company, raised another round of money from Intel, Itochu, and now Shaw, the Canadian cable company. So independent, doing a business with the automotives, the cars, the cruise ships, and hotels. And this company is doing a very interesting way from embedded device to cloud service and the smartphone a little bit too. But it's a really hard business to get into the embedded, like a cars. It usually takes like 3 years to ship the product. So you have to be really, really patient to do business in this area. And luckily, it's so sort of those internet startups in Silicon Valley are not patient enough. So we are in a very good position to do this business here. So here's the advertisement. We are hiring. We are looking for top-notch engineers. Top-notch engineers who can learn anything new in 2 weeks. That's my statement. Often said, right? We're not looking for experience. We are looking for bright people who are passionate enough to learn new technologies. So it doesn't matter if you have experience in embedded or not. Doesn't matter. Come, join, and you're going to do well. And as an incentive, right now we just announced that if you're a good engineer and join in Japanese office, the Tokyo office, then we're going to get the visa for you, and you can work at Seattle office for a pretty long time if you want to. So that's a good opportunity, advertisement, by the way, sorry. The next one, and also I'm a blogger, writer. I think the blogger is a little bit old word. I'm a writer, I write a lot. I became a fan of blogging and started in 2004. And now I shifted my hobby blog to more like a business. So I'm doing this mail magazine. The mail magazine is a strange word, but it's a paid subscription service. The journal, weekly journal called The Life is Beautiful, started in 2011. And this service is actually doing well. I usually don't publish the numbers, but I have more than 1,500 subscribers right now. Everybody paying $8 a month. So it's not a bad business. And I talk about technologies, innovations, entrepreneurship. I also have a corner called the sort of the business lesson for engineers. I happen to have a master's degree in electrical engineering and also MBA, and live in the US and can speak Japanese and English. So I have sort of the broad and unique perspective on the startup scene, the business, the IT. So, by the way, so if you like my talk, subscribe to this journal. So that's the end of the advertisement. So let's get to the key message. So this is my favorite quote. The best way to predict the future, best way to predict the future is to invent it. I'm often, like this is by Alan Kay, I often see people around this industry or even within the industry, right? Those people talk about rumors about new iPhones or new iWatch or new services from Google, right? They are so excited about what's coming and then following Apple, right? They talk about, okay, iPhone 6 is going to be bigger. Of course, it was bigger. But I sometimes frustrated to see those people doing that, especially those engineers, right, who are supposed to invent the new something, right? Not watch Apple. So every time I see those people, I said, don't stop paying attention to rumors. Instead, think differently, right? Think if you are working for Apple and you are in charge of iPhone, then what you're going to do, right? That's the way to think about. Then I would make it bigger, right? And I think this is a very important message everybody needs to carry as an engineer. Right, you are in the driving seat. We are so fortunate. I feel like I'm unbelievably fortunate. I'm an engineer. And an engineer is the best job in the world because we invent. We make futures. Right? We don't talk about the rumors. We invent. Every day we make something happen. So we are in such a fortunate position. Don't waste it. Another one, this is not a quote. This is sort of the message Apple started projecting. Back in 1997, when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, they made a campaign called the Think Different. Very famous campaign. And they sent a very strong message. And I think they are still sending the same message. And because I love this quote so much, so I'm going to read it. So here is to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, The round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently, they are not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or verify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push human race forward. And while some may see them as crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And actually, every time I hear this sentence, I feel a chill, I feel a passion. I feel, I'm so lucky, I'm an engineer. And I hope everybody feels that way. And if you don't, then stop being an engineer. And especially, I like a sentence like round pegs in square holes. I felt that way all the way in school because I didn't like the rules. I don't like the status quo. Here is actually the real story I want to share about the culture of the company. So my company, the UI Evolution, so I'm just a founder. I don't deal with the daily activities anymore, but I occasionally come and talk to engineers to figure out what's going on, right? I'm responsible in making them excited, building a good culture, listen to them, encourage them to come up with a new. And actually that happened last week, right? As I said, I'm back and forth, but I came to here. Every time I come here, I talk to those Japanese engineers. And then they showed me some new prototypes, project, but at the end I said, okay, so tell me your concern, right? If you have any concern about this company, tell me now. I can help you to fix. And one engineer said, we have a little bit of a culture clash. The one thing happening is in the US, we had a lot of engineering service business, right? We've been building a software for Walt Disney companies. And that culture is very different. The mindset of engineering service business is very different from the building a product, right? So the team in Tokyo were building a product for automobiles. And then team in the US, actually not the entire team, but a small team was building applications for Walt Disney. But earlier this year, we decided to shut down that business because I don't like that business. And also, I don't like the culture. So they merged into this automotive group, and then they're supposed to work together. So they started working together. And interestingly, they're building a new set of software on the server side called UI Cloud Connect for the automotives, for entertainment, the maps, and big data. And they started implementing in Node.js. And this is an interesting story, right? They picked Node.js. And I know exactly why they did it. Right? Node.js is a new technology, not proven technology. And of course, it's a good architecture, right? It's a single-threaded, right? Hyper asynchronous, different approach. The JavaScript or not doesn't matter much, but it's really scalable, right? Compared to like .NET or Java or even Ruby, very new. And our engineers chose Node.js because they wanted to learn something new. But this is almost like a funny thing, right? I said, okay, as a company, is it worth to take that risk? Of course, right? This is how we attract good engineers. So I'm totally open to say, okay, if you want to learn Node.js, right? None of them have experience in Node.js. It doesn't matter. They're smart enough. They can learn new things in 2 weeks. So go for it. So they presented that idea to the team in the US. And team in the US says, no way. Node.js is a new technology not established. And first of all, we don't know how to write Node.js. We are expert in Java. We have shipped several products in Java. We want to go Java. So there was a culture crash. And so that the engineer in Japan told me that this is a problem. And then they actually said, right, help us to convince them that the Node.js is the better way to go. And I said, this is not the difference between Node.js versus Java. I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons, right? In certain cases, Java is better. But that's not the issue. The issue is the culture, right? I was very upset to hear that those engineers in the US said, we don't want to learn Node.js. They said, it's going to take time for us to learn Node.js. They're not excited about this new opportunity. And that's unbelievable. That's unacceptable. So I immediately called yesterday morning and talked to the boss to say, well, this is not about the Java versus the Node.js. This is about the culture. And if anybody in this company who doesn't want to learn new technology, then they don't belong here. That was my message. And this is so important, right? The mindset of learning anything new, challenge, change, ignore the status quo, breaking the rules, right? I break rules. I just broke rules coming over here when there was a big road and there was no cars. So I crossed, jaywalk. Does it matter? No. It's efficient. Go for it. And nobody going to jail by doing a jaywalk, probably except in Seattle, by the way. And so even though this is the English presentation, I put the one Japanese word, heisokukan. Here's a quiz. What's the good translation of this word? Does anybody know? Actually, if you look up the dictionary, like a goo.com, or they don't. So heisokukan, the heisok, the first part, meaning the obstruction or being blocked. And then the second part is a feeling, right? So it's a feeling of being blocked. And everybody says that Japan is filled with this feeling. What's going on? It's a feeling, right? So everybody feels like you're not allowed to innovate. That's why we're stuck here. I mean, this is again unacceptable, right? And then here is, so I came up with a good translation, not direct translation. I call it the innovation deadlocks. I did a little bit of a consulting work for a big corporation in Japan. About 2 of them in last 3 years. And there is a common thread. So when I interview executives, they said, when I was young, I was very hungry. Right? They're 50s and sometimes 60s, and they're very hungry for success. So I was working hard. I was very innovative. But the younger kids, the engineers, are no longer hungry. They're not creative. Right? That's they said, the executives. If I interview those younger engineers, they said, oh, I'm so busy doing the work. Right? I have a project. Right, I'm right, day and night, I'm working on this particular project my boss told me to do, and there's no room for innovation. And when I come up with an idea, I talk to boss ignores. And it takes forever to get the approval. That's why innovation doesn't happen. So both sides, right, executives and younger kids, they feel like they're blocked. They feel like they're not allowed to innovate. Right? According to them, nobody is responsible for this lack of innovation. Nobody is accountable. Right? That's why innovations are not happening. Right? Those Japanese companies like Sony, Panasonic are losing against the Google and Apple because they're conservative. They feel like they're blocked. That's the major problem. And I think it's really common in many Japanese companies, especially big ones. So we have to change. And I've been thinking about what does it take to make this thing unblocked. And my answer is not a corporate structure. It's more about the personal. So I came up with my own quotes. So if you're going to use it somewhere else, it's a public domain, but use my name somewhere. Innovations are personal matters. It's really personal matters. Right? Innovation doesn't happen as a result of the corporate strategy meetings. I mean, do you think that Steve Jobs came up with this vision as a result of a series of meetings? No, he just came up with it from nowhere to say, I'm going to make this happen. Right? Elon Musk, think about him. But he just believed that it makes sense for everybody to drive electric cars. No question. No question. No market studies, no corporate meetings, no bunch of MBAs. Right? I think the MBAs are, I have MBA, but MBAs have a too much emphasis. The company rely on MBAs too much. Right? If putting MBAs and a bunch of software engineers in a round room and let them have a bunch of meetings, then innovation happens, then that's easy. But it doesn't. It doesn't. But innovation, as a result of the vision and passions of individuals, not the corporation. The corporation doesn't have a vision. Individual, like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, has a vision. And they use the corporation as a vehicle to enable their vision. Right? A lot of people think differently. Right? A lot of people think, oh, okay, my boss or my executives are supposed to come up with a vision, or corporate should have a vision, and I'm an engineer, I participate. Wrong. Right? As an engineer, you have to have a vision. Right? You feel like your passion drives the future. Right? Unless everybody, right? If everybody's like, right, those people in a big corporation, nothing happens. I guarantee. So I talk 20 minutes? Halfway, good. So that was the main message, right? Innovations are really personal matters. And that's the only message you guys should remember from this session. So I do talk about a little bit of a story. I was involved, and hopefully you get a message stronger with this story. So this is the first computer I got. I was 17 back in 77. NEC came up with this training kit called the TK80 with an 8-bit processor, the Intel compatible, 8080 compatible, with the 2 kilobyte of memory. I upgraded to 4 kilobyte later. And the speed of CPU was 1 megahertz. So think about the difference between today's computers or today's smartphones and this. We're talking about megahertz, not the gigahertz. We're talking about kilobytes, not the megabytes or gigabytes. But this was unbelievable. Right? Throughout the elementary school and junior high, I loved math and science. And I hated the languages and the histories. I just ignored those classes, right? As I said, I don't follow rules. So even during the history class, I was solving some math problems. By the way, so for me, it was just unbelievable. It was just such an enabler. Because I just found out that once I learned it, right, it took like a month to build it and learn it. I was able to write the software. I was able to make my own game. Right, even this small screen, I was able to create a shooting game, a Dirty Harry shooting game. It was unbelievable. And then at that time, I found out that I was born to code. Right, so 17 years old. Since then, I'm coding. And actually, I'm coding every day even today. I'm 54. I'm still coding today, right? The reason why I said I'm a founder of your evolution, not the CEO, is because I found out the CEO doesn't have a time to write code. So I stepped down. So I said, okay, somebody else is running the company. I prefer to write code. But anyway, so I found out that I was born to code. And this computer was so primitive, right? No development environment, no SDK, no compiler, of course, even no assembler, right? So everything should be written in assembly language, machine language, but I need to translate this assembly language into the binary code, and then I need to type in everything, every step, one by one. So I was frustrated because, yes, I could build some games using this way, but very inconvenient. So I started building some development environment. So I built my own assembler. I built some database. And I think at that time I needed more memory, so I added one more board, plus the display card. And then I started building the editor, like the text editor. And then realize, okay, so now I have assembler, so it's a lot easier to write programs and games, but slow. And then assembler language is inefficient. And then somebody came up with the language called the game. The language name is game, so it's really confusing, but it's like a simplified version of the BASIC. So somebody came up with a language called the game, and then they created an interpreter of this game language for this machine, so which allowed me to create games in the game. Do you get it? But it's not a joke. I'm talking about the game is a language, but I was able to build applications using this game language a lot easier than writing assembly code. But unfortunately, because the CPU was such a poor CPU, 1 megahertz, it ran really slow. So I determined to build a compiler. Right? I was still in high school, and at that time, obviously, I didn't get any formal education of computer science, and actually, I had no idea how to build it. Or actually, I didn't even imagine that somebody has done a compiler and there were a bunch of books. And so I didn't even pay attention to those books and papers. I just started implementing it. And actually, within 2 months, it started working, right? Because I knew how assembler works, and the game language was a simple language. So this is my first publication as a software engineer. This was the ASCII magazine. It was a monthly magazine about the computer, mostly for the hobbyists, right? ASCII was much smaller companies, just targeting those geeks at the time. And then so I wrote the 4-page article to ASCII with the source code of the entire compiler, right? Entire compiler fits the bottom half of those 2 pages, really small. Because I knew how to do. Man, this machine is such a small memory, so I need to make everything small. But I was able to prove that my compiler works by compiling the compiler using my own compiler. Right, because the compiler was written in game language. And then once I got to compile the compiler, then my application started running really fast. So I was so happy. And again, this is about innovation, but I didn't talk about money at all. But I just became passionate about this device, the game language, the opportunity to build a compiler. Later I found out that this was the world first compiler for this level of training kit. But it didn't matter. But I was so proud of it, so I decided to publish it. And ASCII published it, and I wrote 4-page article, and ASCII actually gave me a $30 a page, about $3,000, and 3,000 yen per page for 4 pages. So I just published it. And then at that time, there was no sort of a consensus about the copyright. Sort of as a result of this publishing article, my compiler became open source, or actually public domain. So a lot of people started porting my compiler to other machines, like a Commodore PET. I don't know how many people know it, or Apple II. I was excited to see Apple II running my compiler. So that was good experience. It's like the beginning of open source, even though I didn't pay much attention to the laws and copyrights, but did. But one thing, something happened, annoyed me, because a little bit later after this, the NEC came up with the first well-packaged computer called the PC 8001. It was still 8-bit processor, but it has a keyboard and display. And then somebody else, not me, ported my compiler to this new personal computer from NEC. And ASCII started selling that software. And then as the author of that software, he started receiving a revenue share, the royalties. And ASCII didn't talk to me at all about this. And I found out that this and says, okay, something is wrong, right? I wrote this article. Of course, I got $30 per page. But somebody took my software, or borrowed my software, and turned into this commercial product. And ASCII is making money. He's making money, but not me. But unfortunately, for high school students, it's very difficult to even think about hiring a lawyer and sue ASCII, so I didn't do anything. But I learned a lesson. But I think it's sort of the innovation and businesses sort of things I started making sense in myself. So the next project I did a little bit better. The next project was Candy. So Candy was, again, the world first, the CAD program for personal computer, right? Including IBM PC. It was the world first. And the original target was the NEC's 16-bit personal computer, PC 9800. And again, this project was sort of started almost by accident. Right? So after the compiler, ASCII hired me to work for them, even though I was still a high school student. And then I think at this time I was already in the college. But they hired us and they hired me and paying maybe a little bit above a minimum wage, like a 500 yen, $5 per hour, to do some software. So I was doing that, right, going to ASCII every day after school. And one day, Sam Furukawa, the vice president of ASCII, came back from US with a device, right, new device I've never seen, which was the pointing device, the mouse. And he said, well, he was so excited, so I got an exclusive license to sell this mouse in Japan for Microsoft. But at that time, right, there was no Windows. It was just MS-DOS, all text-based. So nobody needed the mouse. So Sam said, okay, but we need a software, some software to sell mouse. And he said, but I have only one, and if somebody wanna play with this mouse, you have to write that software. And I just immediately volunteered. Oh, I'm the right person to do it. Just let me do it. Again, right, not much thinking about the business model or money or anything. I was just so excited to see this new device. And I have to be the first person to deal with it. So Sam gave the mouse to me. And then I started writing some program, which became Candy. And again, it's a part of the luck and right time and the right timing. But at that time, I already had this PC 9800. And it was the first personal computer with a decent graphics, the VGA, right? 640 by 400. And so you can, right? So even though it was still MS-DOS machine, if you write some software, you could draw some lines and circles and pictures. So I started, right before getting the mouse, I started doing some experiment. And that PC 9800 had a coprocessor, right? The CPU was a little bit faster than the training kit, like a 5 megahertz, 16-bit. But right, I think the engineers in NEC thought that the CPU is too slow to draw lines, so they added some coprocessor. Right? Obviously, some very smart people in NEC built this coprocessor to draw lines. So there was an API to call to draw lines, and then if you call it, then the hardware accelerator, coprocessor, does draw the line. So I started testing that, but it was not fast, it was slow. And I was frustrated to see the slowness of line drawing. And I felt like I have to challenge, right? Maybe there's a PhD guy in NEC built this coprocessor. And I was still maybe in a college, but maybe I can beat this guy by writing the software for CPU. So I started writing a line drawing routine using only CPU, not the coprocessor, to draw lines. And I often call, right? Whenever somebody does this today, right, on the internet, it's called the reinventing the wheel. Right? Every time I try to do something, say, oh, this is done, oh, this is already done. Why you bother? No, you should bother. Right? Everybody needs to learn how to build the wheels. But anyway, so I did. And then the first attempt, right? First routine to draw a line. The speed was actually equivalent to the hardware. So at that time, I knew I can beat it. And I love the assembly language. I still love. I don't write assembly code anymore, but I love because you can count the number of CPU clocks, right? The conditional jumps to determine how to minimize the loop. So I started optimizing it. And at the end, my line drawing routine using only CPU was 3 times faster than the hardware. So I was so happy. But again, it was just right? The purpose was just innovation itself. I just wanted to prove to myself that I can beat some guy in NEC building the hardware. But anyway, so I had that line drawing routine sitting on my computer. Then got a mouse. So obviously, right, the mouse and a fast line drawing routine, then I have to build a CAD program. And then I have to admit that my father, who was the architect, not the software architect, but the building architect, sort of had some influence. Because I knew that those professional architects are using $1 million machine to do the CAD programs. So I thought, right, if I'm able to run the CAD program on a personal computer, it's going to be exciting. So I did. So within 2 weeks, I had a sort of simple kind of prototype of the CAD program, right? Using the mouse, you can draw lines, pick the lines, move around, the rotate, the zoom, package, move around, and then show it to Sam, right? The Furukawa-san, and asking, says, okay, here's a demo. And I still remember that moment. He was so excited. But not only because it allowed them to sell the mouse, but he saw the potential because that was the first CAD program for personal computer. So, right, again, it was the luck, but he was the right person to show that software. He knew the potential, right? Not only selling the mouse, but he thought he can sell the software. So that then the Candy became a real project. But I think I was probably 20 at the time. I was sophisticated enough from the past experience that there is something in the value in the software. And I didn't want to do it as a contractor, right? ASCII was paying $5 an hour. So I talked back to Sam that but there is one condition. I want to quit ASCII as a contractor. I want to become an independent software developer. I'm going to build this software using my own time, and I'm going to give an exclusive right to sell to ASCII this software, and we're going to share revenue. And it was a good decision. It took like 6 months to build. Actually, the CAD itself was built in 3 months, but another 3 months to build all the device drivers for the 30 different types of printers and 30 different types of plotters. Right? Because there was MS-DOS, there was no concept of the printer drivers, so I needed to invent my own to support those devices. But after 6 months, ASCII started selling this candy for $400 a piece, which is a great time, unbelievable, right? Today, if you build a similar software for iPad, if you're lucky, if you can make $1 per copy. But at that time, it was $400. And I think the total gross revenue was over $10 million with this software. So I got some revenue share. So that was a great deal as a college student. Wikipedia said I bought 3 condominiums as a result of this, but the answer is I bought only 1. But it was a great deal. So anyway, this is what happened. It's 40 minutes. I practiced several times, and every time I talk, I have more slide, but this is the time I have to end. So I'm going to switch few. A similar story in Windows 95. Windows 95, again, I did, but it was a result of passion, not the corporate strategy. Right? If I have another opportunity, I can explain, but the Windows was a backup plan. Like there was a bigger project called the Cairo. The Cairo was supposed to be the future, and Jim Allchin was in charge of it. But I, just the individual, felt like the Cairo will never happen because they hired so many people. They had like 10 software architects with a bunch of MBAs and computer scientists. And I felt like they're just doing the meetings, and I rather write code. So I went to other group. I was in the Cairo group, but I went to other group, the Windows 3.1 group, and then convinced them that the Cairo is going to fail, so we should build a backup plan. And that backup plan became Windows 95. So anyway, so Windows 95 even was not the result of the corporate strategy. It was the result of a bunch of hackers who knew this corporate strategy will fail, and we have to rescue. So a bunch of things. A board meeting, I love it. But there was a moment I went to a board meeting to talk to Bill about the Cairo versus the Windows 95. But the Windows 95 was called the Chicago. And because what I was doing, I was actually stealing a lot of ideas from Cairo. The same company, so it's all legal. And implemented, right? Just implementing quicker is the winning. And the Cairo guys started really upset to say, oh, this Satoshi, right, who used to be in the Cairo group, stole our ideas, started implementing, and cooking up some this software. That's a problem. So they escalated everything all the way up to Bill Gates. And they wrote about 200-page document which describes why the Cairo is better than Chicago. The Chicago is the Windows 95. And I was supposed to respond, but I didn't have a time because I was so busy writing code. So I went to that room, and actually there was a really interesting moment. The Bill Gates, the Paul Maritz, the Steve Ballmer, Jim Allchin, everybody was there. And then the Cairo guys, a bunch of scientists, had a 200-page document that proves, actually I read it, and it's a really good statement. The Cairo was better. But they're not ready. Chicago was ready. So I brought the beta version of the CD. And I built. I don't have time to deal with this 200-page, but we are ready to ship. Let us ship. And at that time, Bill Gates immediately made a decision to cancel Cairo project. So think about the Cairo had 400 people. They spent more than $100 million as a corporate strategy. But it took too long for them to build the software, and a hacker like me was able to beat that. And that became Windows 95. So think about it. So the innovations are personal, right? This is my quote. Very, very personal. Unless you become passionate, nothing happens. So don't blame your boss. Stop blaming your boss or corporate strategy, right? If innovation is not happening, then it's your fault. So you are responsible to make it happen. Okay, 45 minutes. Am I supposed to have a Q&A? Or you don't have a time? Okay.
Yes.
So a few questions.
If anyone has any question, please come up to the microphone. We can take a 1 or 2 question quickly.
Thank you very, very, very much for a wonderful presentation. In companies that kill kill competition, does that kill innovation?
Yeah, interesting. That's the business. So innovations are innovations by individuals, and then the corporate behavior. Right, as I said, the corporation is a vehicle to enable innovations. But there is the shareholders, and some of the behaviors of the management team in Microsoft, is it right, was not appropriate. You're right. But as an individual innovator like me, integrating the Internet Explorer to Windows did make sense. It was convenient for users, right? I was not trying to kill Netscape. But the corporation, with a bunch of shareholders, decided to use that as a weapon to kill. And you're right, it killed the innovations. But that's the unfortunate part, but you're right. Good question, thank you very much.
Actually, it was more specifically within a company.
Okay.
So the same company, if you kill competition in the same company with 2 competing products, does that kill innovation?
Good question. But maybe, but the innovation is sort of the result of the natural selection, right, which is better, which comes earlier. So I have no guilt on killing a Cairo project because they just had meetings, and I knew that they will never, ever ship the product. So I don't feel like I killed anything. Actually, I stole a lot of ideas from them. So a lot of ideas in Windows 95 came from Kairos, the same company. And later, some people from Cairo team joined us, and we worked together. So yeah, some hard feelings with some of them, but mostly was okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your speech. Very passionate, and I really enjoyed. Just a quick question. I work in a financial company based in headquarters in US, and we do have our own application as well. Whenever there's a trouble or not behaving well, we escalate to our programmers, R&D. I look it up who's handling the issue. Most majority of the programmers there are Chinese, India, Russian. I barely see Japanese people working as R&D or Japanese. Since today's subject is invent the future, I would like to ask, how would you think about Japanese? I know you have some comments in your Mail magazine. I read them as well. But I'd like to see how the Japanese education doing in terms of computer programming. What's the future of it? Do we have more chances? What makes it do it? Okay, yeah.
Okay, I understand. So yes, this is going to be another presentation for 40 minutes, but the education is the key. But I think the education itself, the computer programming, the skills analysis is not bad, but the culture thing, like a good example is the round peg in the square holes, right? This country doesn't like that kind of a behavior. And that behavior education is a major problem, and we have to fix it. So we need to really encourage the breaking rules, right, being different, right, and really don't respect the status quo. I think that's the key. And the Japanese people are as smart as Indian people or Chinese. There's no difference. The only difference is this culture, and we have to really break through.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It was a really interesting session. Thank you very much for your great speech, and everyone, please give him a big round of applause. Now we will have a